In the Longtrellis kingdom, the king and queen watch a group of circus performers perform for them, though the queen doesn't seem particularly interested. Suddenly one of the artists opens her cloak and reveals that she is pregnant, which upsets Rani and causes her to run to her room to cry as she is unable to conceive. The king runs after her to console her and apologizes, explaining that he did not know the artist was pregnant, otherwise he would not have allowed her to come to the palace. Sometime later, a necromancer approaches the royals with a solution, though he warns them that someone else must die to maintain the balance in order to bring life. The queen is willing to do anything, so the necromancer explains the conditions. They must kill a sea monster in the lake and extract its heart, which must be boiled by a chaste girl without anyone noticing. Then the queen will have to eat the heart and she will immediately become pregnant. When they reach the lake, the king dives and she immediately becomes pregnant. When they reach the lake, King dons a diving suit and immediately goes underwater, where he finds a giant white creature sleeping. He carefully approaches it and uses a spear to pierce its body, causing the monster to scream in pain and writhe around. In the struggle and without clear vision, the king receives a fatal blow from the creature's tail. A few seconds later, both bodies are taken out of the lake, but the queen pays no attention to her dead husband. She simply waits for the guards to bring the animal's heart and walks away with it. Once they return to the palace, they find a pure servant from the staff and leave him alone at heart. As she throws it into the boiling water, she gasps and pulls back as she feels something strange in her stomach. It turns out that she is magically becoming pregnant. The queen later eats the cooked heart without hesitation, and she also immediately becomes pregnant. That night, both women gave birth to a pair of healthy boys at the same time. A huge funeral is then organized for the dead king, but the queen does not care much as she only has eyes for her son. 16 years later, the queen's son Elias has grown into a lively teenager with strange white hair. The queen always keeps an eye on him, so he often escapes her obsessive ways by hiding in the palace maze until the queen gets lost. Elias then meets the servant's son Johann, who looks exactly like Elias. It seems as if they are twins born from a lake creature. The boys are attracted to each other and enjoy spending time together, especially swimming in the lake, as they can stay underwater for long periods of time. Unfortunately, the palace guards always find them and separate them. The queen does not like her son spending time with a peasant and calls Johann's mother to threaten her with banishment if she ever catches the boys together again. Elias hears this and tells his mother not to trouble Johann or his family because he is like her brother, but this makes the queen even more angry and she orders her son to never harm Johann again. Don't hang out with. Obviously Elias disobeys him and continues meeting Johann in secret. One day, the queen sees her son passing by and calls him to ask a question. As they talk, she notices something strange about the boy's smell. After he leaves, she secretly follows him to Elias's room and learns that he actually talked to Johann. The boys are incredibly happy to discover that people can't tell them apart and they fantasize about their future, planning to take turns ruling the kingdom as kings. Johann also considers granting a noble title to his mother in his castle. Their conversation is interrupted when the queen knocks on the door, so Johann quickly hides while Elias tells him to come inside. The jealous queen reminds her son that no one will ever love him as much as she does, clearly unwilling to share him with anyone. After he leaves, Elias shows Johann a secret passage that will take him back to the city through the slaughterhouse. As he makes his way through it, Johann is suddenly hit from behind and realizes that the queen is waiting for him to kill her. He has to struggle a bit to avoid Johann's attacks, but fortunately he manages to escape by hiding among the flesh. This incident makes Johann realize that he is not safe here, so to avoid putting his family in danger, he decides to leave the city. From the palace, Elias sees Johann leaving and sets out to stop him, but Johann refuses to stop. However, he understands Elias's concerns, so he leaves something to help comfort him. When he pierces the trunk of an ancient tree, a stream of water flows out and Johann tells Elias to visit the spring every day. If the water remains clear, it means everything is fine, but if it becomes dirty, it means he is in danger. After Johann leaves, Elias checks the water every day and makes sure the other children do not dirty it. One afternoon, he is horrified to discover that the water has turned red, so he wastes no time setting out on horseback in search of his friend. His escape is reported to the queen and she immediately organizes a search party that goes deeper into the forest, but finds no sign of Elias. A few days later, Elias arrives in a small town and everyone runs to hug him, thinking he is Johann. It seems that he has been missing since he went to the forest a few days ago. At the same time, the necromancer visits the queen again and offers a new deal. He will bring her son back in exchange for a sacrifice, which the queen accepts without even asking for more details. Back to Elias, he begins wandering through the woods in search of Johann, who is actually down a cliff. A few days ago he fell and hurt his leg, so now he is stuck there. He can hear Elias calling him and tries to answer, but Elias can't hear him. Instead he notices a terrifying monster, who appears before him and tries to attack him. Frightened, Johann drags his leg while trying to hide inside a cave, but the monster manages to make his injury worse. At that moment, Elias arrives and the monster is immobilized, so Elias takes advantage of the opportunity to attack it with his knife. After this, Elias helps Johann out of the cave and takes him back to his new life in the small town. Meanwhile, the creature transforms and is revealed to be a queen. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Strongcliff, the king is known for his sensual lifestyle. He is always surrounded by women who fulfill all his desires, but he has yet to find a woman worthy of the title of queen. One day, he heard a beautiful voice singing a very beautiful song. The king looks out the window and sees a peasant woman in the distance, but when he tries to call her, she goes back into her house. The mystery only interests the king more, so he sends a messenger to the woman's house with a precious necklace as a gift. When the messenger arrives, a bucket is pushed through the window to leave a gift for him because the woman refuses to leave her house. After the man leaves, it is revealed that the woman is Dora and that she lives with her sister Ima. They are both very old and ugly, so they avoid going out as much as possible, sisters. They are surprised to see the necklace and Ima thinks they should send it back, but Dora refuses and keeps it because it makes her feel beautiful. Later in the evening, the king comes to the door and asks for the woman with the wonderful voice and tries to persuade her to do dirty work with him using sweet words, along with the promise of a reward. Ima thinks that she would want the king to see her like this, so she asks him to come back in a week and she will let him see her finger. The king is so desperate that he agrees. For the next week, Dora tries to find a way to make her wrinkled finger look nice, like dipping it in burning wax and sprinkling it with medicinal herbs, but it only gets uglier. When the king finally arrives, Dora panics and grabs Ami's hand, noting that her hand is smoother because she spends all her time sucking her fingers. She immediately pulls her sister towards the door so she can finger Raja through the lock, and Raja immediately begins kissing her as she asks for more. Eager to take it further, Dora agrees to give him more but with one condition. She will come to meet him at the castle during the night and he must wait for her without lighting a single candle. Once again, the king's desperation makes him agree and he goes to the palace to have the servants extinguish all the candles. Meanwhile, Dora put glue on all of Ima's wrinkles to make her body look younger and pushed them behind her back so that they would not be obvious in the dark. Dora then enters the palace and when she reaches the king's room, she immediately lies down on the bed under the blanket to hide her body. Raja soon joins him and they work for a few hours. After Dora falls asleep, the king lights a candle to get a better look at her and is horrified to see an ugly wrinkled woman. He calls her a witch and accuses her of betraying him before calling the guards, who promptly throw Dora out the window. Thankfully she is still covered in blankets and they run into a tree, saving her from falling to the ground. At that time a wandering witch finds the hanging rope and laughingly helps it down. She notices how sad she looks and decides to give her some comfort by breastfeeding her. After the witch leaves, Dora's body begins to change. Her skin becomes smoother and her hair becomes longer and redder. She is a beautiful young woman now. While Dora gazes at her new body in wonder, the king and his men come into the forest to hunt the boar. However, he is distracted when he sees Dora and he immediately falls in love with her. Some time later, a palace servant comes to Ima's house to leave a beautiful dress and an invitation to the royal wedding. It turns out that Dora is getting married to the king and she wants her sister to be there too. Dora wears the dress and goes to the palace, feeling out of place but happily enjoying the meal. When Dora sees her, she takes her to another room and tells her what happened, and promises a better life for Ima if she gains power as queen. Later when the party is over, Ima refuses to go because she feels lonely without her sister. She sneaks into the royal room and tries to convince Dora to let her stay but Dora refuses, saying that no one will believe they are sisters due to the obvious age difference. Ima is desperate to know what Dora did to become beautiful, so to silence her Dora says she was humiliated. Suddenly they heard the king coming, so Dora hid Ima behind a curtain before taking good care of her husband. Curious, Ima can't help but notice the married couple getting busy, but the king sees her and thinks she's the old lady from the previous day, so he immediately has the guards escort her out. Desperate and distressed, Ima goes to the blacksmith and asks for help. She wants all her wrinkles cut out, so she too can be beautiful. At first the blacksmith refuses him, but when Ima pays him by giving him all the jewels of the fancy dress he immediately changes his mind. Moments later, Ima is tied to a tree in the forest, and as she screams in agony the blacksmith proceeds to cut her down. When Ima returns to town, she is nothing more than a disfigured, bleeding man on the verge of death. Meanwhile, in the Kingdom of Highhills, Princess Violet is performing a special song for her father the king, but he is not paying any attention because he has found a flea on his arm. The little insect starts jumping all over his body and the king is so amazed by its movements that he keeps an eye on it until he manages to catch it. As soon as Violet is ready, the king takes Flea to his chamber, where he begins to keep her as a pet. He prepares a cute box for her to sleep in and even puts his finger in it to feed her his blood. As the flea grows up, the king teaches him new tricks, such as pulling a clockwork. This new passion leads him to neglect his royal duties. Weeks pass and the king begins to take the royal dinners back to his room, where the flea has grown to the size of a pig. One night, The king calls the court doctor to his chamber because the flea has grown to the size of a horse, but is not feeling well. The doctor panics, but follows orders and gives the king the bad news: the flea is dead. Raja hugs his beloved pet and asks the doctor to keep the secret. After some time, the king announces that he has found the perfect way to get Violet the best husband she can. He hangs the flea's skin in the throne room and promises that the first person to guess which animal it came from can marry his daughter. Violet is not happy with this plan as she wants to choose someone for her personality, but King continues to ignore her wishes. One after another the men come into the throne room and try to guess, but not a single one of them can imagine that such a huge piece of skin could be that of an insect. Suddenly a savage monster appears, and thanks to his nose he can tell immediately that the skin belongs to fleas. Everyone is in shock and the king has no choice but to keep his promise, causing Violet to run away in tears. Raja finds her on the rooftop about to kill herself, so he brings her down by reminding her that their reputation will be destroyed if they don't keep their word and she has to obey him. With no other option, Violet leaves with the demon, who walks her to her home. Violet gets tired in the middle of the forest, so the monster picks her up and carries her the rest of the way. Eventually they reach the top of a cliff, where Violet is carried the rest of the way. Where Violet discovers that her new home is a dirty cave filled with human bones. She tries to avoid the monster and its horrible food as much as possible, but the monster grows tired of waiting and forcefully drags her to his bed. Days pass and Violet is nothing but dirty and miserable. One morning, she sees a woman gathering herbs on the opposite cliff and asks for help. From this distance the woman can't do anything, but she promises to come back with support. After some time, the woman returns with her entire family, who happen to be circus artists. A man throws a rope to cover the distance between the rocks and walks on it like an acrobat until he reaches Violet. Then he picks her up and carefully walks the rope to return. Starts. At that very moment the monster comes back and runs after them, using his hands to walk on the rope. The acrobat runs as fast as he can and thankfully makes it to the other side safely with Violet, so the family cuts the rope and drops the monster. The family later takes Violet in their car and she eventually starts laughing again after seeing their antics. Unfortunately the monster has escaped and reappears by jumping into the car to begin attacking the family. He instantly kills 3 people, so a terrified Violet takes a knife from a basket and runs away with the others. Angered, one of the monster performers drinks some wine and then shoots flames at the monster's face. Unfortunately this is not enough to stop him and the monster attacks again, killing the rest of the family instantly. Violet tries to get away, but now that she is alone the monster finds her easily. To avoid being killed Violet pretends to accept him and calms him down before climbing onto his back to go home. However, as soon as he walks away, she uses a knife to slit his throat. Meanwhile, at the palace, the king is feeling very ill since losing his daughter, but when a servant announces that she has returned, he immediately gets out of bed. Everyone in the throne room is shocked to see Violet holding the demon's head in her arms and succumbing to its power, and even the king does the same, and for not listening to her, apologizes. Some time later, Violet is crowned Queen of Highhills. Elias attends the coronation to represent Longtrellis, as he is the last royal left. Dora is accompanied by the King of Strongcliff, who suddenly notices something strange: his skin is changing back. Frightened, she runs away from the ceremony. Violet didn't notice him because she was too busy watching an acrobat walking on a fire rope to remember the family that saved her.